As we wait for the imminent update, I figured it was a good opportunity to put together another 4v4 video from a good tournament we had a few weeks ago. Once again, I'm going to encourage you to try it out, especially if you find yourself burnt out of 16v16 random lobbies. There's a lot more opportunity for interesting engagements in 4v4. If you want to find a team, you can try the Looking for Team channel on my Discord server, the link for which is as always in the description. There's already been a good few people who've put together or found teams to play with that way. The more people that use it, the more likely it is to work. Just take the TSS role when you join and you'll see it in the tournament channels. There's no entry requirements for 4v4 aside from owning one of the planes in the lineup. Side note, because I'm certainly going to get this question again, we're playing Su-27s, F-15s and Mirage 2000s because the 14.0 airframes are not currently in the tournament lineup. The most meta picks right now are usually some combination of Free Gripens and Mirage 2000s, then an F-15JM or Su-27SM up high. Now the opening stages of the first game has been playing in the background. As usual, my initial job up high is collecting as much info on what the opposition are doing as I can. Straight away I'd spotted multiple members of their team heading towards the C point. In these situations you're usually wanting to push towards their home cap, in this case the B point. This is because if they do capture the C point it will transfer to a D point on their side of the map. So it's in our interest to take the fight over this direction, otherwise they can consolidate their capture point advantage and force us to be the aggressors. The Fox 3 meta is generally about who makes the first mistake, and being the aggressor usually leads you to make mistakes more often. So right now we're trying to stick together and collectively push to the B point. That way we can flip the cap advantage and make them push into us. You'll also notice I'm trying to stick just behind my team. It's important if you're playing at altitude to avoid someone getting underneath you unspotted. I want a clear picture so I can pick my engagements and get the ERs and top-down attacks on distracted targets. It's at this point I'm going to switch to Biscuit's POV. Side note, the player camera in server replay can be a bit glitchy, so you may notice that from time to time. Now Biscuit turned into fire here and found himself caught notching in the opposite direction, which sees him become outnumbered. As this becomes apparent, you'll see how he starts focusing on making sure he lives as long as possible rather than trying to force shots. This buys time for me to come over and support, and he even manages to get an overshoot out of one of the opposing Mirages. He's essentially turned a positioning mistake into the engagement that won us this game. Cut back to my POV now after Biscuit takes out the first Mirage. If you check the map top right, you'll see I'm set up in a perfect position, unopposed, covered on all sides by my team. I can get my ER off now and take out the second Mirage. We do lose AtreX, but Biscuit has attracted so much attention that I can get a nice top-down R77 to take out Mirage number 3, who's currently having to focus on the head-on with Biscuit, and I can also suppress the F-15 to prevent him from getting any top-down attacks on my own team. I'll switch over to Sabazis at the end here as he wraps this one up. Next game is on Mysterious Valley, which is probably my favourite tournament map. I feel like there's a lot of flanking options available, lots of terrain to work with, and it's also pretty big, so I feel like I have a good amount of space to work with up high. I've skipped the early stages, but we're essentially looking to play this one reactively. I can see from my TWS that there's a few of them low down in the valleys quite close to the C point, closer than the line we're flying, as you can see in the top right on the map. Now on valley, if you take the C point, the captured D point gets placed around here, so when we identify they appear to be pushing the C point, we're going to let them take it and put the D point right in our path. I will of course be looking to fire some top down R77s and one of their team crashes, possibly due to blacking out in a turn to defend. I wasn't entirely sure looking at the replay. Now as they start to cap the C point, Amori below me is going to get forced into a head-on with another Mirage. He gets taken out, but it gives me a good opening to turn it into a trade. However, he does get a couple of Mikas off before he dies, and you'll see me fail what should be a relatively simple notch. Angle gating did play a small part, but the reality here is my angle is wrong. I'll run through the sensor view afterwards, but just pay attention to the first missile. You should be able to see it's quite clearly ahead rather than perpendicular like it should be. Most of the time when someone asks me what they did wrong, it's exactly what I did wrong right here, simply not pulling away from the missile enough. Or in other words, you're just not notching. Now before we do get to the sensor view for that, pay attention to how we've set up our positioning, top right. Supreme is coming in from home cap at a very deliberate angle. Whilst it's a 2v2 now, Biscuit and Supreme have a perfect position to pincer the two remaining players in the enemy team, who are both located in more or less the same place. If we take a look at their POVs, you can see how the remaining F-15 and Mirage are trying to have to notch from two angles. The positioning advantage we have is too great, and that wraps up game 2. Before I move on to the next, let's take a quick look at my failed notch. Sense of view can be buggy, so just try to ignore the blinding white light that shows up on the right. With the two Mikas, you should notice how the second is showing the telltale signs of angle gating, which does mean it was at least notched. However, the first has a pretty solid track most of the way. I'll pause it here. In this freeze frame, we can clearly see how it is actually well in front of the 90 degrees on my RWR. Watching it back in the live clip, I could immediately tell after the game, just visibly off the position of the missile diamond, that it was in front. Once you've watched enough of these back, as you play, you'll start to be able to visually tell from the missile diamond if it's at your 90 degrees without using the RWR. Of course, I didn't manage that here, but we all make mistakes, that's just the way it goes. Now, game 3 was against xHide. For the unfamiliar, they are the team who won last Thunder Cup and air superiority. We've beaten them a couple of times in weekly tournaments, but as you would expect, they usually come out on top. On the Friday tournament before this one, for example, they beat us in a particularly close game on Bourbon Island, where I messed up the 1v1 in the endgame. So naturally, we were particularly eager to do well in this one. Now, on that note, people frequently ask me about our comms and strategizing in these games. So with that in mind, I thought I'd show you the strategy AtreX cooked up for this game. Right, so to be completely honest with you, I wasn't actually listening to AtreX when he was drawing whatever this is. So I'm just kind of ad-libbing this as we go. I wouldn't pay too much attention to the color coding. I believe that is just meaningless in this case. You know, apparently we've got a brawler taking off from their airfield. I mean, if you can get away with that, it'd probably be an okay strategy. And then apparently, you know, me and the AWACS is doing everything. I'm not sure what's going on here. I mean, I know this is basically saying, you know, they're running a couple of Gripens, so we don't want to fight them over the flats over here. That's fine because the home caps are here. You know, you can kind of get the fight over here if you want it to be. Which is, I think, what these green lines are saying. I'm assuming that's saying someone takes home cap and then maybe notches this direction. Because if you notch in that direction, then obviously the fight might get dragged out over here. I've no idea what this is meant to say. Maybe like, you know, push down the middle, but don't be afraid to double back on yourself. These lines here. Something like that, maybe. The crux of it is basically we want to fight over here. We don't want to fight over here, and that's basically it. Now, the neat thing about this game that you might have noticed is you can see everyone on the map, top right. When I went into server replay on this one, it gave me the neutral point of view. I'm not sure how. There was a cast count following us a bit in this tournament, so I think it's something to do with that. But I could only get it to work for this game, even though the cast count was there for a few of them. It would be cool if we could get the neutral map view all the time in server replays. So Gaijin, if you're listening, help me out. Now, on Desert, it's very easy to see the early lines your opposition is taking, so we're playing very reactively off that. As mentioned in my very high-level strategy talk, me, Biscuit and Sabazis are pulling our initial lines away from the flats where the Gripens can really abuse the multi-pathing terrain. Then we've got Supreme taking a long line out to the right to try and wrap around. And I've switched to Supreme's POV, as you can see, as he gets a nice flank on Runaway as we're trying to draw their attention into us. It's kind of like a hammer and anvil strategy when you look at it. If you're like me and you like Total War games or similar, you'll be familiar with the concept. Fix the enemy in position with a solid wall and then outmaneuver on the flanks. Switch back to my POV now, and I'm basically on full defense. I've done my job here and drawn a lot of attention my way. All I need to do now is focus on my defense, and Biscuit can grab Shark's tail and pick up the next kill. Jump ahead a little bit now. Sabazis was basically doing an excellent job keeping Bongo and Gaz occupied, meaning we get to capitalize on a 3v2 earlier and then a 4v2 now. I make a poor R77 launch. This one actually almost team killed, so as always a reminder to be extremely careful when you're firing Fox 3s into furballs. Supreme gets Bongo's tail though, and I'm able to get a free ER shot to secure the kill, as we then jump straight into Biscuit's POV as he wraps this one up. So I've skipped game 4, there wasn't much to show as one or two of their team were having packet loss issues. Instead, we're in Game 5 now against Conquerors, who up to this point were the only team other than us with a perfect record so far. So this game was highly likely to decide the winner of this weekly tournament. We're playing the same as we usually do, passively and reactively for the three of us in the centre, then Supreme is looking for a flanking line. Again, we can see them close to the C point, so we're going to look to consolidate over the D point and draw their attention. I'll pop Supreme's POV bottom left as he gets a good ambush on the F15, however he falls victim to the classic of thinking a severed enemy is no longer a threat. So a reminder to always double tap and then some more if you aren't sure. Meanwhile, the rest of us are holding over the D point. The fight is going to be forced here, so we don't need to be aggressive. They're going to have to come to us, so we simply need to set up and be ready for it. For the rest of this one, I'm going to speed it up in places because it was quite a drawn out match. I was also watching it back and I couldn't think of too much noteworthy commentary to add. It's essentially a 3v3 on the D point, but the mistake they make is pushing in one by one. We pretty easily pick off Fulcrum and Max who come in by themselves, but then in the endgame, Biscuit messes up a notch to the final Mirage and Sabazis gets isolated in the 1v1 as I mess up my own positioning, defending from the severed F15 from earlier who still has a functioning radar, so I can't really turn this into a true 2v1. This results in an endgame where I take out the final Mirage who runs out of fuel and then take the D point before simply keeping distance from the F15 who is too severed to contest the capture point. Now I mentioned packet loss issues earlier, and I had some of my own at the start of game 6. I'll just show you a bit of what I mean here. Thankfully, playing at altitude, as long as it doesn't rip your wings off or mess up a notch, you can survive, assuming it eventually stops, which it does. If I was playing down low, I would have crashed very quickly and my team would have had to deal with a 4v3 match. The downside was I wasn't able to get solid info on the enemy team with my TWS who were playing an aggressive C point push. I was trying to communicate via the in-game chat as my Discord was messed up at the start as well. The issue was I only managed to spot 2 going to C, when in fact essentially their entire team played that side of the map. This led to Supreme, who was originally planning on taking a flanking route around C, being heavily outnumbered, but he manages to turn it into a 1-for-1 trade by taking one of them out before he is overwhelmed. Now as Supreme gets taken out, my packet loss is cleared up at this point, so I can get some nice top-down R77s on a Gripen pushing me. In true Gripen fashion however, he eats a hit from splash damage. The second missile is much more top-down however, so presents a lot more danger, forcing him to turn out to notch or else risk getting proxied. This puts him straight into the path of Sabazis however, who takes him out, as Biscuit takes out a Mirage, exposing himself in a process, essentially making it a trade. The endgame is a 2v1 though, and I have a very dominant position on the final Mirage, able to pressure him and force the kill with a double R77 and R27 ER launch. That's all for this one. The outro is some replay clips from Game 7. I sat the final game out in case my packet loss issues came back, so I went into the server replay and got some highlights from that game as my team won the final game and we finished the weekly tournament with first place and a clean 7-0 record. If you want to watch more esports content this weekend, the Armoured Apex 4v4 ground qualifiers will be on the official esports Twitch channels. You could also sign up yourself if you want to have a go. If you do give it a watch, look out for the mythical teams, Ignis Avis and our own ground team Ouroboros. I'll also put a link to both Discord servers along with my own in the description. Next video is most likely going to be the F2 with the update looming. I also want to do a full updated dedicated notching guide at some point, but that one is a bit trickier as it requires a lot of work to record the necessary clips and edit all the annotations from sensor view. I also find myself struggling with time these days as I'm going through a kind of transitional period in my job, which is eating up a lot more time than usual. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed this one and I'll see you again next time.